Welcome to the WPAOG podcast. Today we're joined by retired Lieutenant General Benjamin C. Freakley, West Point class of 75. A decorated Army leader with over 36 years of service, he led troops in combat in Iraq and Afghanistan and later shaped the Army's future as Commanding General of U.S. Army Accessions Command. Now a professor of practice and leadership at Arizona State University, he continues to mentor and develop the next generation of leaders. Please enjoy this episode with our host, Jamie Enos.
General Freakley, thank you so much for being on the AOG podcast today. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Jamie. I appreciate it.
50-year affiliate, great contribution that you're giving back here to AOG and also the cadets here at West Point. You've had an amazing career in the Army as well, 36 years plus of active duty service. I mean, everywhere and anywhere, right? All over. What even inspired you to pursue a career in the military and come to West Point?
My father was a World War II veteran. He joined right after Pearl Harbor. Initially, he was enlisted, and during the Battle of the Bulge, he received a battlefield commission. He actually left the Army after the Second World War for 6 months and did not like it and came back in as a sergeant first class, and then applied for and received a direct commission and had a very strong career, retired as lieutenant colonel with 22 years of service. I have an older brother who's 10 years older than I am and who had already graduated from the University of North Carolina. My parents were not college graduates, so they really emphasized college to myself and my three siblings. But at 12 years old, my father said, I always wish I had a son that went to West Point. And my brother had already graduated from UNC, and I have two sisters.
Oh,
so
that's a lot of pressure.
And then part of it, too, is I wanted to pay my own way through college because I saw the burden that my parents carried to have my older brother and sister paying for them for college. And quite frankly, I also thought I needed a disciplined environment. And so I applied to West Point. And probably like many graduates and many cadets even now, they're not fully sure why they went to West Point. There were different motivations. But once I got there, I absolutely loved it. You know, I found that some people hated it, some people loved it, and some people put up with it. I absolutely loved everything about it. I played rugby at the academy. Of course, you make friends for life at the academy. But this whole immersion into the values of duty, honor, and country, this idea of serving. The other thing is I was a Boy Scout in a very strong program. And both the scout leaders, one was a veteran of the Korean War, non-commissioned officer, and the other had gone to Virginia Military Institute and was our town surgeon. And they were just strong examples. And I just saw these strong examples of military veterans and wanted to be associated with that.
That's an incredible story. And coming from that background of having that basis to get here at 12 years old, that's a lot of pressure, I would think. But getting all of the right ducks in a row to kind of see all those pieces fall into place and those opportunities that are even still here for current applicants to come to West Point, some of the same reasonings that resonate. That's very interesting. You're so involved with leadership, not only through your experiences, but your current role at ASU is teaching leadership and a special advisor to Arizona State University. In your experience there and throughout your military career, cadets are asked here at West Point to develop a leadership philosophy. How would you summarize yours pretty quickly, of course? We don't have a lot of time here, and I hate to ask you to shrink it down, but how do you define your leadership philosophy?
First of all, the essence of leadership of all the things we do is trust. Women and men either trust you or they don't. And it always, in and out of combat, it always just struck me that even in arduous training, a non-commissioned officer would ask her soldiers to do something and they would do it. And I would just reflect on, why are they doing this? Why are they taking this chance? Why are they doing what they're being asked to do in and out of combat? And the essence of leadership is trust. And how do you get that trust? Integrity, competency, and getting results. You have to be a leader of integrity. You have to live the honor code at West Point your entire life. And women and men will follow leaders who are competent. We don't like to waste our time. We don't like to be caught up in inefficient moments. We don't like to walk up into a complete disaster of a mess and say, what's going on here? So we as people want to be around, we like to be around people who know what they're doing, who know their stuff. And then leaders have to get results. And people want to be on a team that wins. That's why everybody loves Army football. We win now. We went through a dark, gloomy period, but thanks to Coach Munkin, we've emerged and because of leadership. But leaders have to get results. And so with integrity, competency, and results, you yield trust. And that's the essence.
Do you have any tips and strategies for how leaders and cadets, as they enter active duty status, how they can cultivate those qualities in themselves and within their teams too?
Well, yes, absolutely. First, you have to live the Army values of loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. You have to live what we're taught at West Point: duty, honor, and country. You have to live that. You can't say it. You can't sort of visit it. You have to commit yourself. I teach character-driven leadership, which is the commitment to do the right thing in the right way for the right reasons. And the cynic would say, okay, who defines right? But values define rights, ethics define rights. Values are what we believe, ethics are how we behave. So, first of all, take what you learn at West Point and bring that to the Army as far as character and being a leader of character and living the values of West Point and the values of the Army. Demonstrate them. Second, the class of 2025 just selected their branch, and it's an inflection point. They've grown up with an identity. They were named by their parents. They were good students. They were good athletes. They did different things in Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, 4-H, whatever it was. And they came to West Point with an identity. And that identity went from plebe to now varsity. And that identity was defined by being in F2. That's the only real company at the zoo. That was my company. But they're identified by what company they're in, their year they're in. But now they've got an incredible identity. It's their branch. They're now a chemical officer or a ordnance officer or an infantry officer. And now they've got to grow in and build the competency in that field. That'll start. The Army recognizes that. They will go to their basic course. And there, they've got to get dug into it. When I committed Fort Benning, now Fort Moore, having come from combat in Iraq and was commanding general at Fort Benning, it infuriated me when I would meet lieutenants who weren't given their all in infantry basic, because they were going to combat, Jamie. They were going from Fort Benning to combat. And I would actually have people tell me, well, sir, I've been at West Point for 4 years. I'm kind of taking a break. And I would have to really restrain myself from wanting to stand that guy at attention and talk to him about the incredible responsibilities he was about to go take on in leading men in combat. So I think what they do is bring what they've got from West Point, which got them there, their families and West Point, bring that to the Army in their branch, become competent, and then work hard with their soldiers. Listen to their non-commissioned officers. Trust has to be earned, and then trust has to be maintained. It can't be demanded. They might respect you. They might follow you. They might follow your orders, but it's different when they trust you. And so it's got to be earned through hard work and through integrity, competency, and getting results.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more with that. And I actually have a Fort Benning story. And I remember walking through your house when we were coming through the captain's course, actually. And it was a little bit of a dwell time because it was after the first deployment and we were going right back out to the next one. But yeah, a lot of good times with those, 9 months that we spent down there and turn and burn. But that identity of we all absorbed it, the families absorbed it, the children that were born into it, and all the traditions became part of it as well. And you took it all in and as a family as well. But I'm sure you don't get to that alone, right? Like I even like I just said, right? The families absorb it and all that. Did you have a mentor that impacted that philosophy for you throughout your career or in your career that impacted that?
Well, firstly, it was my father who had fought from right after the Normandy landings till the end of the war as an infantry platoon sergeant and an infantry platoon leader. As I mentioned earlier, I was surrounded by good role models growing up here in the Shenandoah Valley. It's an area of hard work, rural. People do a good day's work here. I would throw hay all day from 6 o'clock in the morning till 7 o'clock at night. I went to Ranger School after West Point and infantry officer basic, and it's arduous, and I was very fortunate to get through it, but I was also first in my class. And I only mention that because people would say, well, wow, West Point really must have set you up to be the first in your Ranger class. And I said, no, my Boy Scout troop did. Because it really was a tough outdoor. Joining as far as the Army and mentors, number one, I can't emphasize enough how critical the non-commissioned officer corps is to the United States Army and makes us completely different. Having commanded a joint task force in Afghanistan of all the NATO forces and Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, the real differentiation between American military and others is our non-commissioned officer corps, who are just extremely competent, dedicated women and men who attain the ranks of sergeant and really know how to lead. And so listening to them, you've still got to make the decision. You're the leader, you're responsible, but listening to them, I was very fortunate. My first platoon sergeant was good. He wasn't great. My second platoon sergeant was unbelievable. Jackie K. Lancaster from Lexington, Kentucky, 50 years ago. But he really taught me how to train. He taught me about what was important. He taught me about soldiers. My first brigade commander was Colin Powell.
Wow.
And General Powell was an amazing role model. And here's a colonel who you'd think didn't need to spend any time with lieutenants, but he would talk to us. And he would talk to us about the profession of arms and about being a soldier and about leading. And so just along the way, I was very fortunate to have women and men who were very influential. And you talk about the importance of family. I've known my wife since we were 12 years old. Went to high school together, got married a year after West Point when we were 23. But she's an incredible teammate and very strong with feedback. It's funny, as a general, I'd give a speech and my aide or like my driver would say, that's an awesome speech. She'd say, that was terrible. And here's where you went wrong. And this is what you should have emphasized. And I got better because of her direct feedback. So it takes it to be successful. You really need a strong family. The Army gets such a great deal from Army families because spouses, the Army spouse, helps the Army run. And I also believe that having served in combat 3 times, that when you have a strong family at home, it just gives you strength abroad. You know that there's a foundation. You're going to return to a great supportive environment when you get back. It's so important. And so I think all those factors, family and role models and people who directly mentor you, like Sergeant First Class Jackie K. Lancaster, you got to have those folks around you. I was put into command of a company. I still can't fathom it, to tell you the truth. I was promoted to just the sign of the times post-Vietnam and the upheavals the Army was going through. But I was promoted to first lieutenant on June of 1977. And in August, my battalion commander said, I'm going to put you in command of Alpha Company of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, the Currahees, the Band of Brothers guys. And I said, I've been a first lieutenant 2 months, Jamie. I said, I'm not going to do that. I'm not ready to do that. You can't do that to me. 157 soldiers said, no, you're going to do it. You go down there for 90 days and you see, and we'll talk then. And thank God for first sergeant J.W. Braden, because here was a first sergeant who knew what it was to lead an infantry company of 157 soldiers, but he sure took me under his wing. And I always knew when I was wrong, because he would say, now, Lieutenant, we need to have a talk. And I knew that I had just jumped over the guardrails and he was going to have to get me straight. But I think things like that really help you. And you make a really good point that our cadets and our future officers coming out of the academy and colleges, they're not alone. They might feel alone sometimes. They may be intimidated. It is intimidating to be 22, 23 years old and be in charge of a bunch of soldiers or with significant responsibilities as a staff officer, but just embrace it, trust your training, trust where you've been, and listen to the folks around you and move forward.
I hear that story so frequently between the NCOs and the value of the NCOs, and not to ever overlook that. And I want to make sure I reiterate that as well. And also,
there are academy graduates who can be pretty full of themselves, not be very humble. I mean, they've been successful their whole life.
Mm-hmm.
They got into West Point by being successful. They stayed at West Point by being successful. Maybe they're in the top of their class by hard work, but some of them don't transition and learn to listen to their non-commissioned officers. And I used to tell, I would give a leadership class to lieutenants 200 at a time at Fort Moore. And I would say, the first thing I would say to them is, there's a whole host of soldiers and non-commissioned officers that can't wait for you to join them. They need you. They're expecting your leadership. But every night they get on their knees and say, "Dear Lord, please send me a leader with common sense." And sometimes we miss that. We can be full of ourselves leaving the academy, maybe not think we know all the answers, and we get sideways almost right out of the gate.
Yeah. And having that network to rely on to pull us back in, right? And I think that's when that long gray line, I hear that's the other side of it, right? So it's like the NCOs and how valuable they are, and then the strength of the long gray line right behind you, right? To help guide you and mentor, and never always answering the phone, right? Always, nobody's ever saying no, right? Everybody's picking up that phone to help you get out of that or get you into something, or navigating what those options are going to be. I think it's really valuable as well.
The long gray line holds you accountable, but is also there to sustain you. And 4 years ago, a young woman and her parents came to our house here in Virginia because she was going to go to West Point. And they wanted me to talk to her about it. And I said, "Have you been to West Point?" "Yes, sir." "Have you gone to the West Point summer leadership training?" "Yes, sir." "So a lot about West Point?" "Yes, sir." "You talked to people about West Point, the West Point experience?" "Yes, sir." I said, "About the academics at West Point?" "Yes, sir." "About the opportunities?" "Yes, sir." "In clubs and sports and activities?" So I said, "I don't really have anything to tell you except this. Be considerate about the friends you make, because they will be your friends for the rest of your life." She'll graduate this May, and I saw her recently up there, and she said, "I took your advice. I've got the best friends beyond my imagination." But those friends stay with you, and they are, and to your point about picking up the phone or them calling you or a hard problem or whatever, they're always there. They'll always be there. They had that common shared experience of being at the academy together, and it's a positive thing.
Yeah.
And it's a refreshing thing that you know that those who went before you have paved the way, and those who come behind you will fix everything you broke. Like someone said to me, "Does it bother you to go to a ceremony when one of your subordinates gets promoted to 4-star?" I said, "Are you kidding me?" It's a rejoicing moment, because maybe somehow, some way, I maybe helped them a little bit, but more importantly, I know they're talented, and to see that the Army gets that talent to lead them, hallelujah.
Right. Right. Well, that's that other piece of leadership philosophy, right? Making sure other people lead, hiring people better than you take over.
Yeah, well, you asked me about my leadership philosophy, but I was asked this a lot, especially in my last 4 years in the Army or so, about impact. What is
Mm,
impact, or
right.
what is legacy? And my view of it is, the legacy that one has nothing to do with rank, how much money you make, the awards you get, the recognition you get. That's temporal stuff that goes away fast. I think the best thing an Army officer can do, legacy wise, not that we're worried about legacy, but just impact and legacy wise, is prepare the people behind you to lead the institution, to really train people to do their job in and out of combat. And if you do that, you've done your part.
Certainly impactful, because that's got the fold that keeps going and giving and goes on forever. And that's a great transition to your role now and how you give back with the 50-year affiliate program for the class of 2025. You were here for branch night, like you mentioned, and you got to interact with some of those cadets as the infantry officer here. What kind of questions did they have, and how did that go?
Well, the first thing I'll say is I really applaud the Academy's thinking about the 50-year affiliate. We did not have that. We were a bunch of ignorant teenagers. And when senior leaders like Omar Bradley came to the Academy, we were almost made jokes out of it versus seizing the moment. And it's not lost on me. We have a son who's the class of 2010, and there's 35 years between his class and my class. He keeps me honest as well with humor, and old grads and our perceptions of ourselves and
Core,
how
I'm sure
things ought
there's
to
a
be.
few core has jokes at the dinner table.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But so number one, I think that this idea of the 50-year affiliation that has been developed is a manifestation and a clear image of the long gray line, especially when you get to talk to people 50 years your senior and ask them, what was it like? How is it? And realize that many things are common of what they're experiencing and what we experience.
Mhm.
There's a lot of commonality, but things are also different. I mean, the only thing that's ever constant is change. And so our leaders are leaving the academy gates are going to be agents of change, be involved in change and help the Army change and be relevant and prepared for whatever missions come its way. The thing that struck me first was the amount of energy in the room. Our branch selection was not close to that. It was very important, but you probably know, someone's probably described to you in 1975, we would stand up and announce our branch. And there were boards on the stage in Thayer Hall that basically said, you're going to have to pick 50 engineers, but no more than 82 engineers or whatever. So they would take the numbers off as my classmates would select the branch, and you'd be calculating, okay, if I don't get this, I better pick that. And so, but the cadets coming into Eisenhower, and they were fairly controlled until the envelopes were handed out, and then the tension was palpable. And then once they opened them, it was elation depression moment. And they principally the question. So I went and sat with a company, not my company, because somebody had been with F2, which is fine. And they said, "Would you mind going to sit with this other company?" I said, "Absolutely." So I went and sat, and they started asking me questions, sort of, who's this guy in the suit? And so I was talking to them about which branches they were interested in and those kind of things. And one of the cadets next to me really wanted to be armor, so we talked about that because I commanded armor formations in my brigade and above, and we were talking about it. He didn't get armor; he did not receive his branch, and everybody around him received their branch. And so I zeroed in on him, and I said, "What do you think?" He said, "Well, I don't know." He said, "It's not what I wanted," but he actually was branched infantry. So he's talking to the former commandant of infantry, so I'm not going to exactly commiserate with him that he didn't get a great branch. But what I said to him is, I said, in the end of the day, soldiers should receive great leaders. They deserve great leadership from their sergeants and their officers. So go be a great leader. And I said, the other thing, quite honestly, and my last 4.5 years in the Army, my command oversaw all the ROTCs, all of OCS. So I've been involved and worked with West Point on branching. So I've been involved in branching forever. And I fundamentally believe, Jamie, that the majority of men and women who select branches really don't know that much about the branch.
Right.
And what it is the people. Like, people ask me, what was your favorite assignment or what was your favorite posting? I said, it's hard to answer because it's the people. It isn't geographics, and it isn't the history of the 101st or the 1st Cavalry Division or the Great 10th Mountain Division I commanded. It isn't that. It's the people. And so I think what makes you fall in love are the people, not necessarily the branch. And so he kind of was scratching his head about that when I said, you're going to get to lead 40 soldiers. They need a good leader. You're going to be a good leader for them. And you can even get into mechanized infantry, and even though you're not in a tank, you'll be in a Bradley, or you'll be in a Striker, or you'll be in something. So he was sort of coming around. But the energy, and I just feel like, too, when I went up to the infantry branching area where all the infantrymen came, the questions were like what I always get. How do you prepare for Ranger School? What's the role between a non-commissioned officer and an officer? Hey, where do you think I ought to go to be posted? Because that's their next thing, is they're going to select their posts, and where should I go? So, but it was great. Again, what was fun was all the energy and the excitement, and really the reaction between them, of sisters and brothers grabbing each other, shaking hands, hugging each other, being happy that they're going to be in the same branch together. That was exciting to see.
Yeah, that secondary bond, right? That West Point, now the branch bond, and kind of going, like you said, the post bond is coming up here next. So they get to find out if they'll be, at least in the first iteration together and see how that goes on, a couple of them. So yeah, it's an exciting moment. And the 50-year affiliates, I agree with you. The program is a fabulous program run here by our class services department. And a lot of effort goes into it and the variety of programs that they support. But what I find really interesting that we're starting to see is the 50 years coming back, of course, love it. And the interaction with the cadets and that giving back to the academy in a sense of like mentorship with some of the cadets, because they start to form strong bonds with cadets and that mentorship role and that coaching role. But the cadets are starting to think about their 50 years out. And to me, that has just changed the power dynamics of them starting to really think about how they are now going to be the future, right? Where we have these young people that are so in the moment, right? And especially with everything going like NIL with athletics, and they're thinking about posts and branch and graduating and maybe getting married and starting families and all these other things that are really eminent and high pressure and stressful and happening in the now, that they have to make decisions. And it's always decisions with no information sometimes, as we know, but they're stopping to think about how they're going to do their 50-year affiliate program. And that to me is really representing the power of this program, that your class, for example, giving back is now having that impact, not just now, but 100 years, right, from your graduating class. And that's really a powerful statement on the long gray line. So
that's a very good point. And I'd rather they think about doing well at basic officer leadership course versus coming back in 50 years and rooting for Army to beat Navy yet again. But you do make a good point. And the thing that I would encourage them to look for are the fact that sometimes you think, well, I have a 5-year commitment. No, you have a lifelong commitment of service. You've been given the opportunity to go to the United States Military Academy. And it's different from all the others. And I don't mean it from a competitive perspective, but there's a big difference between going to the Air Force Academy or the Naval Academy, but they're at the United States Military Academy. We have a different culture coming out of West Point, I believe. We have a different tradition. We're the longest of the service academies. And I hope that they see, with Secretary Austin coming to talk to them, the Secretary of Defense from the class of 1975, I think they see Bob McDonald, who left the Army but then served with distinction at Procter & Gamble and now is the head of the Association of Graduates. I mean, these men, because our class was men, but men and women from West Point continue to serve their entire life. And that's what it's about. It's about service, putting others before yourself. And so the takeaway I would hope they see from the class of 75 is, regardless of where their journeys took them, that element of the long gray line continued to serve and make a difference wherever they were. And that's what we expect of the classes coming now, class of 2025, lifelong service, figure out how to do it.
Well, sir, that is, I think, the perfect way to end this. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you so much for giving back to the Academy, to the class of 2025, and all the other classes that this will influence. It has been a pleasure to have you on to gain some insight further into your leadership and hopefully get that out into the community and everybody listening. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, Jamie. Thank you for doing this podcast. I think it's wonderful that you're collecting these ideas and sharing them with others. And I would just say to the Corps that much is expected of them. The nation counts on them, and what we'll see us through is steady leadership, and they'll provide it. So I wish them well, and beat Navy.
Always. Go Army, beat Navy.
Thank you for listening to the WPAOG Broadcast Network. Please take a moment to rate and review the show and join us each week for a new episode. Thank you for listening.